So often people ask me to get perspectives on the UFO topic from outside of the United States. And here we are, we're going to talk all things UFOs with a conversation rooted in a little bit of religion, a little bit of spirituality.
Back then, China was fairly open in terms of the public to know about or the energy works unidentified flying objects, the flying saucers, and also things about spirituality. So a physicist was being taken by the ETs to their spacecraft. And then the physicist was told that even though Einstein laid the three fundamental principles of physics, there's one small mistake that made people believe that we cannot cross a light barrier. China was fairly open to translating articles on UFOs into Chinese language. And then there was a very famous magazine in China called UFO Magazine, 飞碟探索, exploring the UFO phenomena. And it was very, very popular among but in the early 2000s or so, because of certain religious movements in China, the government started to become more strict in censoring documents or articles or books related to the Gong or the energy practices, exercises that the Chinese public did in the past. For example, there was an incident in northeastern part of China in which a farmer was in touch with the ET, and then he had encounter with the ET, and he claimed that the ET actually impregnated him, and then causing, or actually he impregnated the ET, and then causing a baby to be born. There was also another person in China who claimed that he was taken by ETs to a planet called the Guoke planet. And then he wrote books and then was quite popular in China for his stories. A book was translated into Chinese in which it became massively popular and people believed the stories to be true. And I think it actually caused a quite different mentality to the people who read the books, in which I think the Chinese mentality began to change and towards more like the spiritual and also other aspects of their belief systems. Wanted such information, wanted such knowledge, wanted such stories of ET contacts, but couldn't find anything. And then this book came into the Chinese market as a fiction, science fiction, but it's so real that people who read the book immediately began to feel that this is not a science fiction, and then went to their planet and then came back with knowledge and specific verifiable facts that convinced them to be true.
Am I correct? In China, given the censorship issues there, it's published under a science fiction label, which allows it to escape some of that more extreme or harsh censorship. Whereas outside, for example, in Taiwan, it's published under non-fiction.
Well, it happened in 1987 in Cairns, Australia, in which the author woke up in the middle of the night. He didn't know why, but he wrote a note to his wife saying that he'll be gone for 10 days and there's absolutely no need to worry about him. And then he walked outside of his house and then he was lifted up to the middle of the air where he met or encountered a very beautiful, gigantic, very tall, wearing space suit. So this actually explains why there are so many planes and ships missing in near the Bermuda Triangle area, and why there are so many people who disappear or vanish in some of the spots in national parks in the US or Canada, as reported or documented by David Paulides, called the Missing 411 series of books.
Now, you're a lawyer, Samuel, and that's someone who is trained to weigh evidence and think critically for a job. What convinced you personally that the experiences described within the book are credible and worth your time? The Star of Bethlehem was some kind of orb or UFO. That's what the wise men followed. That's why they could follow it. It wasn't a star really high up in the sky. It was far lower down.
Real involvements, because the book actually tells the history of mankind on Earth. We did not evolve from apes or gorillas at all. We all came from different planets and landed on the continent that existed before in the Pacific Ocean called Lemuria, or the continent of Mu, and establishing a very successful civilization. The continents of Lemuria and Atlantis disappeared almost overnight because of natural catastrophe. The continents sank into the ocean almost overnight. That's actually due to ET's intervention. The ETs, specifically from Thiaoouba, they caused the Germans delay in developing the atomic bomb, so the US government was able to deploy the bomb in Japan, ending the World War II much earlier than if it didn't happen. The reason he moved from Cairns, Australia to Vietnam was that he really couldn't, after being shown, after being lived in a very perfect world, perfect, just like paradise, he really couldn't bear with the things that happened on Earth. The Great Pyramid of Egypt was definitely not a tomb of the pharaohs. According to the ETs, they told Michelle that the Pyramid of of Egypt was actually an energy center built by a great, wise, learned person from Atlantis. Because he had the knowledge, he was able to use anti-gravitational technologies and supersonic vibratory systems to cut the huge stones in a very precise manner, so that he was able to align the huge stones perfectly so that it can capture the terrestrial and cosmic energies. When the time is right, they can be opened, and when they're opened, everything will be known. China, with this population size, with the size of the population, there's a grassroots movement of wakening up to the spiritual aspect of certain things. Have you ever wondered why we have not gone back to the moon for the last 50 years? The reason is that we are warned off from the moon. Because China in the recent years especially did have a lot of kind of UAP phenomena over there, and they were actually shot by the citizens over there. The most common shapes would be like not triangular shape, but either spherical or kind of like changing shapes. Well, the media does not report anything related to ET contact at all. And even though there's a very popular Chinese person, well, actually, there are several Chinese people who claim to have ET contact, the government doesn't really say anything at all. The Chinese government media policy, they do not report on this kind of phenomena at all. Don't foresee any whistleblowers from China speaking up, because if the government has a secret research on the UFOs, reverse engineering their technologies, it would be under strict control. It implies that the industrial complex that we are facing against is not a national industrial complex. It's an international coalition. It's not like, to them, there's no concept of the borders. It's them. They would have members from different countries. Well, it depends whether the person is brainwashed by the scientists or not, or by the textbooks or not. To the people, to the general public, Chinese people would believe encounters or scenes of UFOs or UAP. The conversation would depends on who you talk to, would go like, oh yes, I believe that I had encounters in the past, I had dreams about it in the past, or it's nonsense.
So seeing the official party organ of the Communist Party in China soberly discussing a topic that our own government and media has so soundly and consistently dismissed as paranoid fantasy was startling, to say the least.
And I think wakening up at the grassroots level is going to become more effective than the official disclosure. Do not expect the governments to disclose everything or anything that would change the ways of people's lives. Expect something at the grassroots level. And the grassroots movement will be effective in China and elsewhere in the world. they wouldn't necessarily want to like take the time to disclose something that wouldn't have any tangible effect to the stability of the country. There were actually not just one incident, there were several incidents in which the airports of China were shut down because of UFO or UAPs in the sky. And
The encounter of lumberjack, and excuse my pronunciation here, Meng Xiaoguo in Heilongjiang province.
yes, I believe that's a credible account of what happened to him, Mr. Meng. He actually encountered UFO in the forest of northeastern part of China. And he had some kind of effects for diagnosis of radiation effects. I came from the back of the moon, the far side of the moon. And then like there were also exchanges of conversation in which asked how did he get here, what were they doing in the back of the moon, and that person said they were building some structures in the back of the moon.